They said it was about unpaid fees, but what really drove them was greed and power. One morning, the sound of machinery echoed through the valley, and within hours my mountain mansion, years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice, was nothing but rubble. The HOA thought I'd be broken, humiliated, and forced to crawl back in silence. But they underestimated just how far I was willing to go to make them pay. What happens when the people who believe they own everything finally push too far? I never wanted to fight. My dream was simple: peace, solitude, and a home where I could breathe without the noise of the world pressing in. That's why I chose the mountain. A mansion I built with my own hands, perched on land I owned outright, overlooking valleys and streams that had been untouched for decades. For years, it was paradise. The seasons painted my world in colors that belonged only to me: the gold of autumn, the white silence of winter, the wild blooms of spring. Neighbors were few and far between, and that was exactly how I liked it. When the occasional visitor stopped by, they admired the craftsmanship of my home, the dam-fed reservoir at its base, and the quiet life I had carved out for myself. I had no intention of joining a homeowners association, no interest in committees, politics, or neighborhood squabbles. I lived on my land. They lived on theirs. Simple as that. But simplicity doesn't last when greed gets involved. The valley below my mountain began to change. Developers saw opportunity, untouched land ripe for carving into parcels and profits. A small HOA formed, calling itself a District Improvement Association, promising buyers a safe, structured community. At first, I ignored it. Why wouldn't I? Their rules didn't apply to me. I hadn't signed their contracts. My property was independent, purchased years before they existed. Or so I thought. The first letter arrived in the mail like a mosquito bite, small, annoying, easy to dismiss. It claimed I owed introductory fees as part of the new district. I laughed, tossed it in the trash, and forgot about it. But more came. They grew bolder. Compliance notices, community standards, and eventually fines for violations that didn't exist. I tried reasoning. I wrote letters back, explaining my land wasn't under their jurisdiction. I sent copies of my deed, proof of ownership predating their existence. But it didn't matter. To the HOA, every home in sight was theirs to control, and I had the largest, most valuable property of them all. The harassment escalated. Board members showed up unannounced, marching across my land with cameras and clipboards. They cited me for non-approved exterior design, for improper water management, even for the color of my workshop roof. It was absurd. My mansion had stood long before their cookie-cutter bylaws, yet they treated me like a trespasser in my own home. At first, I resisted quietly. I ignored the fines. I secured my gates. I documented their visits. But ignoring bullies only makes them bolder. Soon, construction crews arrived. They claimed easements across my land, carving roads that cut into my property lines. Heavy machines tore into soil that I had maintained for years. And then, without warning, they expanded. Where my valley had once stretched wide and green, skeletons of houses rose up, 35 in total, packed close together, each one encroaching further on what was mine. They built without asking, without permits that could withstand scrutiny. And when I protested, the HOA sent me one final notice. Pay tens of thousands in back dues and community costs, or they would take my land entirely. The day I refused was the day they retaliated. I woke to the thunder of bulldozers. By the time I reached the base of my driveway, my mansion was under siege. Walls crumbled, windows shattered, beams snapped like kindling. In hours, everything I had built was reduced to dust and rubble. They said it was punishment for non-compliance, that my unpaid fees justified the demolition. But I knew the truth. It was theft, plain and simple. They wanted my land, and they thought destruction would force me to bow. But that was their mistake, because I hadn't been idle through the months of their harassment. While they believed they were grinding me down, I was preparing, watching, waiting, and I had something they had overlooked in their arrogance: the dam. For years, it had been nothing but a practical structure, a way to manage water flow, to keep the reservoir steady, to protect the valley from floods. I had reinforced it over the years, maintained it with care, treated it as part of the land itself. But now, under the weight of everything they had stolen, it became something else. It became leverage. The HOA had built their new empire directly in the floodplain. 35 homes, half finished, sat beneath the looming wall of stone and steel. And with a single pull of a lever, I could erase it all. The breaking point came during what they called a compliance inspection. The board marched onto what remained of my land, smug as ever, waving papers and snapping photographs. They pointed at my destroyed mansion as though it proved their point. The president himself shoved a notice into my hand, final demand for payment. His smirk told me everything. They believed they had won, that I was broken. But standing there, holding that paper, I realized something. They hadn't won. Not yet. That night, I walked the dam with a lantern, listening to the restless water. My fingers traced the rusted steel of the control gate, my mind racing. The system was old but functional. With a single move, I could release it all. And so, the next morning, as the board returned with their clipboards and arrogance, I was nowhere near the rubble of my home. I was at the dam, hand on the lever, eyes fixed on the valley below. When I pulled it, the world changed. Image 8, the flood begins. The gates groaned, the dam shuddered, and then came the roar. A wall of water surged forward, a beast unleashed after decades of silence. It tore through soil, snapped beams, and swallowed machines whole. Houses dissolved into splinters. Trucks toppled like toys. Workers fled, their shouts drowned by the unstoppable flood. From above, I watched it all. The empire they had stolen from me reduced to chaos in minutes. Every ounce of arrogance, every false fee, every act of harassment swept away in mud and ruin. The gates groaned, the dam shuddered, and then came the roar. A wall of water surged forward, a beast unleashed after decades of silence. It tore through soil, snapped beams, and swallowed machines whole. Houses dissolved into splinters. Trucks toppled like toys. Workers fled, their shouts drowned by the unstoppable flood. From above, I watched it all. The empire they had stolen from me reduced to chaos in minutes. Every ounce of arrogance, every false fee, every act of harassment swept away in mud and ruin. But it wasn't over. The HOA ran to the law, crying victim, demanding my arrest. They accused me of terrorism, of destruction, of endangering lives. They thought the courtroom would be their shield, but they had underestimated me again. For months, I had documented everything. The trespasses, the forged permits, the illegal construction, the harassment. I had testimonies from neighbors, photographs of fraud, even proof that the HOA itself was operating outside legal recognition. And when it all came out in court, their empire crumbled faster than the houses in the flood. Fraud, extortion, illegal seizure of land. The judge didn't just side with me. He dismantled them entirely. The board was barred from serving again. Restitution was ordered. The HOA ceased to exist. Victory was mine. But victory has many shades. My valley was scarred. The flood had left mud where wildflowers once grew. The dam bore cracks from a strain. My home was gone, reduced to rubble by their machines. Justice was mine, but so too was loss. Yet even in that loss, something unexpected happened. Neighbors who had once been silent stepped forward. They confessed their own stories of harassment, fines, and threats. They thanked me for standing up when no one else dared. For the first time, I wasn't just a man on the mountain. I was the man who had freed them. And slowly, the valley healed. Grass pushed through the mud. The land softened. Life returned. So did peace. Standing on my porch months later, overlooking the valley, I realized the truth. The HOA thought they had broken me, but they had only revealed what they really were, an illusion of power built on fear and lies. And when someone finally pushed back, their empire collapsed. They bulldozed my mansion. I wiped their district off the map. And if there's one lesson left behind, it's this: push people far enough, and even the quietest among us will find a way to roar.